delighted to be joined today by Bas Schnater. I hope I pronounced that right, Bas. You can correct me. Bas is CEO of the Fan Engagement Consultancy and also a business analyst at Media Haus. Again, I hope I pronounced that right, Bas. Thanks again for joining us today. Just for those that don't know you, which I know is going to be in the minority, but perhaps you could just introduce yourself, tell us a bit about your background, career highlights, things like that.
Okay, yeah, thanks for having me here. Short introduction, I'm Bas Schnater. I've been working in the fan engagement space for, is it almost a decade now, I believe? Yeah, we'll get to that when I'm recapping a bit of my background. So I did a bachelor's degree in sports marketing, moved immediately to Australia because there was still a big financial crisis happening in Europe in 2012 when I was very hard to get a job in sports. So I thought, hey, if there's a Euro crisis, let's move out of the Euro area. So went to Australia, worked over a year there in sports at the Australian Open, at a lot of events, sports events over there. Plus, I worked at a conference which was called the Achieving Bigger Crowds Conference, and that was actually around fan engagement. And myself, being an Ajax season ticket holder at that time, before I moved to Australia, I was always mildly frustrated on the lack of customer service that I was receiving, both from the club, both from the stadium. They're not the same. So the stadium staff was always very rude. It was always just sort of pipeline material, what you felt like as a fan when you entered the stadium, quick search and just move on, and receiving your beer, which was not cold anymore, spilled half of it was spilled over your hand when they moved the beer over the counter, those kind of things. So, and I noticed at that conference, that Achieving Bigger Crowds conference, that there was actually this substream within sports marketing that was mainly about better customer service. It was about understanding fans and providing a better service to them. And I talked to my very good friend in the industry, Mark Bradley, over there, and there were a couple of other organizations, and that's where I got the fan engagement mindset, understanding that sports marketing is not just about the best caviar for sponsors, but it's also about how do I actually listen to my fans and make sure that they get the best experience possible, for the reason that they will simply come back and with more people, hopefully. So yeah, that's the fan engagement introduction. Moved back from Australia to the Netherlands, started my consultancy in 2013. So that's when I started. And which was mainly first a lot still about social media, fan engagement, a lot of analytics on social media, what to post, where, how, tone of voice, etc. Then I went back to do a master's degree in Leuven, and then Leuven is in Belgium, and then I got hired at AZ Alkmaar as a sort of a first general marketing executive, but there were so many domains that were still just floating in the air that no one was willing to pick up. So I just grabbed the CRM bubble and the fan engagement bubble because those were closest to my heart, and started building those out. And I started in a scenario where the CEO said, hey, there's a lot of data and we don't know what to do with it. Ajax does this and that. Do something similar so we look more like Ajax. So that was a bit of the briefing. And over the years, I've built that out into a marketing intelligence approach. So we transferred it into marketing intelligence approach. I will come back to that later. Did that for 2.5 years, and now for almost 2 years, I'm working in media next to my own consultancy still, which I still help clubs with on their digital transformation process. Trying to make more sense from CRM data.
So you must have seen a major shift change, definitely over the last decade, but then, probably more timely over the last 12 months, when I think everyone realizes just how important data analytics is to be able to deliver fan engagement when you don't have fans in venues. So, you know, if you were sort of, if you could give some advice to clubs that are still on that digital transformation journey, you know, what would it be when it comes to the importance of data analytics, fan engagement, and then obviously in turn the fan experience?
Well, it's an interesting part, because fan engagement used to be a lot on the match day experience, and that's what it was solely focused on. And it always had this fluffy layer around it. It was nice, pink and fluffy fan engagement term, which had a lot of interpretations. And now, because for a very long time there has not been any other way of communicating other than digitally, now all of a sudden that fan engagement part becomes it got a more of a relationship maintenance layer. Plus, a lot of sports organizations started to understand that there are actually some measurable aspects to that. So you can indeed measure how fans interact with your content. What do they do with it? What's the direction you want to push them to? How do you listen to fans? So many elements to it. And that's what I believe that in the last year definitely has accelerated immensely. I hope those skills will remain, that we don't fall back to the old pattern of only matchday experience. And I hope we will get into some sort of a hybrid form of fan engagement, blending digital fan engagement and matchday fan engagement together.
And then, you know, sort of taking that a step forward, obviously over the last 12 months, you know, sort of clubs, sports entertainment venues worldwide have suffered, you know, huge financial losses due to the pandemic. So, you know, what kind of offerings can they deploy in terms of trying to get ancillary, you know, revenue optimization in place?
A couple of things. I always like to get inspiration from non-sports areas, because their sports is just a part of the wider entertainment industry. And if you look broader than that, you can already see quite a few examples. There's, for example, the Nationale Opera and Ballet. We call it, it's National Opera and Ballet Center here in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, and it's a massive venue where you would go for nice concerts, etc. And now they've actually set up a lot of live streams where you could order a nice box with drinks and food for at home, and then you order a live stream and you basically create that home experience that you like. And it's a different experience, of course. It will never replace the actual in-venue experience, but at least that's a way how a venue has tried to sort of still reach out to those customers that they have, because they're passionate. The ones that do want to watch those live streams, they're still dedicated enough. It's impossible to get 100% of your stadium or venue visitors to provide them such a substitute. I think it's always still a very small group compared to that total venue visitor, but still it's something that they do offer, and it's very important to keep at least those hardcore followers, fans, customers, name them as you like, to keep them engaged, to keep them warm for when they can come back to the venue again, and hopefully that's very soon.
Yeah, exactly. And then sort of, you know, taking that a step forward, I know obviously in the UK that they're slightly further ahead than the rest of us in Europe and have the roadmaps in place. Although I know you mentioned Ajax there, and I know they've done a lot of pilot events and test events. I think they had 5,000 at the Johan Cruyff Arena. So, but when we do get back to reopening, whether, you know, that's obviously a lot of countries are looking at initial reopenings at the sort of 20% before building up, sometimes in increments, and then in the case of the UK, going back to full opening. So how do you think the whole fan experience and fan engagement is going to need to evolve bearing in mind that fans perhaps, are going to be much more mindful now of their safety, security, COVID restrictions, potentially still in social distancing. So how do you see that whole evolution moving forward?
Oh, that is a big question. I think that it's gonna be a challenge to get everyone back to the stadium again. Let's bring this back to sports context. I think it's gonna be a challenge because there's a fan base can always be. If you see the fan base as a pie, it can always be sliced up into different slices. There's the slice of the hardcore fanatics, and they live and die for visiting the stadium. They are always there. Then you have a majority group that is always the ones that are once a season, twice a season, 3 times a season, whenever suits them best. And then you have a group that is quite often there on general admission tickets. And you still have the season ticket holders that visit 60-70% of the game. I think there's going to be quite a challenge on. At first, we'll see a wave of everybody wants to experience it again. So a lot of people will say, okay, the very first game that I can go, boom, we're going. But humans are creatures of habit. And we've now created a habit that substitutes are also quite good. So we've developed quite good substitutes, as in the TV production, for example. And watching a game from home on the TV has always been a challenge, has always been sort of a substitute, but we all, as sports marketers, sort of agreed that the venue experience is still the best. And I do believe that's still in place, but I do think also that a group of fans that used to visit the stadium would now quicker say, I could also watch this game in a bar, or I could also watch this game with friends at home, for example. So I think that it's still going to be quite a challenge to get everyone back to the stadium and reach those capacities that we used to do before COVID.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting time ahead, because like you say, I think, we'll get fans back in for that first match, but it's going to be keeping them coming back. But anyway, so moving on, I noticed on your social media of late that there's some, talk of this data maturity model. So I know you're not quite ready to launch yet, but maybe you could just give us a bit of a teaser, tell us a bit about it, and when we can find out more.
Yeah, so this process started when I was still working at AZ a while ago. Jeff Wilson and I have been talking a lot as industry friends, and always wanted to work together on a couple of projects, which we did with the growing attendance model. We've been working for that also quite some time before we published it. And with this one, we actually noticed, both of us from our consultancy experience, that there's always the same questions coming up. What is good data? How do I understand if I'm doing something good or not? How do I compare myself to the market? These are always questions on what should I grow on first? What should I look out for to improve first? These questions always showed up with various clients that we both had. So we actually said, okay, can we then, if these questions are sitting in the market, can we find something? Can we create a tool that actually measures sort of on a couple of pillars within the data maturity process? Can we define a couple of pillars, and can we then ask clubs or federations or leagues to fill this in to see if we could give them a score along those axes? One of them is strategy, for example. Can we find can we create a couple of questions in a way that we can measure how far this organization is when it comes to data strategy? And can we then compare them to the market, or can we compare them to the sport that they're active in, or the league that they are playing in? And that's something we've created over the last couple of years, tested it a lot with some major football organizations, a top club from Spain, Liga, the MLS, for example, also joined in the testing process. And in that way, we were constantly able to fine-tune that model. And now I believe we have something so valuable for the market, where a sports organization could just fill in a 10-minute survey, giving them some scores. I run an algorithm behind it that automatically translates these scores into their into a sort of a visualization. And in that way, that organization can understand, hey, I'm over exceeding compared to the market when it comes to strategy, though my analytics part is lower than the average in the market. So that's probably something I should work on this year. And it gives organizations in that data maturity or digital transformation process, whatever you want to call it, it gives them some guidance and a set of prioritizations on what they should focus on.
Okay, that sounds interesting. So I'm looking forward. We'll have to get you and Jeff back when you launch this data maturity model to talk in more detail. Then hopefully get to see both of you at ALSD International at Liverpool Football Club's Anfield Stadium this September. But for now, Bas, thank you so much.
In my agenda, so
yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, and we'll speak to you soon. And obviously, we'll make sure that once the press release is available, we'll share it with all the Sports Venue Business readers and viewers.